Have you ever seen a ghost fly at 600 miles an hour? Because on September 14th, 2025, 21 of them did, just 50 feet above the ground, slipping under the radar of the most powerful air defense system Russia has ever built. But here's the real twist. They weren't the main act. Somewhere in that same dark sky, a 43-ton Soviet-era bomber was carving a perfect arc through enemy airspace, so low it could almost touch the treetops. Its mission? Deliver 4 smart bombs into the beating heart of Russia's northern war machine, and get out alive. No satellite, no GPS, just gravity, math, and nerves of steel. What happened next wasn't just a military operation. It was a lesson in physics, strategy, and the terrifying future of modern war. And it all started with a radar that couldn't see the floor. Let me show you how a $900,000 gamble outsmarted a $579 billion fortress. It was 5:28 a.m. Somewhere deep beneath the forests near Kirishi, a Russian radar operator took a sip of lukewarm coffee. His screen? Calm. His sky? Clean. And the billion-dollar system in front of him told him everything was fine. But it wasn't. Just beneath the radar, AS gaze, 50 feet above frozen soil, 20 machines were screaming across the earth like whispered ghosts. No radio signals, no heat signatures, no errors. They were invisible, because they weren't flying through the sky. They were flying under it. You see, the S-400 Triumph, the pride of Russia's air defense, can scan the heavens with terrifying precision. It can track 300 targets at once. It can hit missiles mid-air. It is a monster by any modern standard. But it has one enemy it cannot kill. Not with missiles, not with software, not with money. That enemy is the shape of the Earth. From a flat radar dish, the world ends in a straight line. But the Earth curves. And anything below that curve, it doesn't exist. Not to radar. Not to Sergei, the man in the bunker. Not to the billion-dollar S-400. The Ukrainians knew this. They didn't just plan around it. They built their entire attack on it. Imagine trying to spot a mouse by staring at the ceiling. That's what Sergei was doing. So while he scanned the sky for danger, the real threat was already inside the house, tiptoeing across the floor, and what's worse, that mouse wasn't alone. 497 miles away, a lone bomber named Silver Wolf was doing the same thing. Flying so low his altimeter screamed in protest, hugging the Earth's curvature like a shadow. And he wasn't carrying cameras, he was carrying warheads. But how do you make a 43-ton steel-bodied jet disappear? Not with stealth, not with luck, but with math. Let's take a closer look at how one old bomber turned physics into the ultimate cloak. Most people think invisibility is a trick of technology. Stealth coatings, silent engines, sci-fi gadgets, but not this time. Silver Wolf didn't rely on secrets, he relied on physics. At 4:52 a.m., he was flying just 100 feet above the Russian countryside. That's lower than a 10-story building. For a 43-ton bomber, that's suicide, unless it's intentional. Why so low? Because radar doesn't curve, it scans straight, but the Earth bends. And in that bend is a shadow, an invisible trench dug by gravity and geometry. Fly low enough, and you vanish into it. Silver Wolf's flight path wasn't straight. It was a 547-mile arc, a massive detour that made zero tactical sense on paper. But this wasn't paper, this was war. And the S-400's radar, as powerful as it was, had one fatal weakness. It could only see what the horizon allowed. Ukraine's intelligence knew this. They had mapped every inch of the radar's reach, its eye line. From the air, that horizon looked endless. But from the ground, it was just a line on a map. And Silver Wolf stayed beneath it like a ghost under a bedsheet. And then, it got worse. For Russia. At 5:15 a.m., his GPS died. The signal was jammed. A system called Kusuka 4 had switched on, flooding the skies with electronic noise. For most pilots, that's a death sentence. But Silver Wolf didn't flinch. He reached for an old-school switch. Not for radio, not for backup GPS. He switched to INS, Inertial Navigation System, no satellites, no signals. Just tiny spinning gyroscopes inside the jet, tracking every movement by momentum and time. It's a system so quiet, so ancient, it's immune to jamming. Jamming GPS is like shouting at someone to confuse them. INS is like navigating while already deaf. You can scream all you want, it doesn't matter. That's how a giant jet, burning fuel at Mach 1, vanished into a shadow made by the Earth itself, guided only by gravity, gyros, and guts. And the craziest part? He wasn't even the smartest machine in the sky that morning. Because while Silverwolf trusted math, the drones trusted something even colder. Artificial intelligence. And their plan was far more terrifying. 50 feet. That's how close they flew to the frozen ground. Not one drone, not 5, but 20, moving as one. The Palianytsia wolf pack. They weren't fast, they weren't big, but they were smart. Each drone had no pilot, no joystick, no one watching a screen. Instead, they had something far more terrifying. A brain of silicon. An artificial intelligence trained not to think like a soldier, but like a predator. They flew silently, whispering over valleys and rivers, adjusting their path hundreds of times per second. Wind gust, corrected. Power line, dodged. Unexpected fog, adapted. They were doing what no human could. They were surviving. And they weren't just flying, they were hunting. Their target was the Kirishi Refinery, a beating steel heart pumping 355,000 barrels of fuel every day into tanks, ships, and jets. It was Russia's artery in the north. Getting there meant more than avoiding radar. It meant threading through a world of noise, terrain, weather, and electronic warfare, and doing it without flinching. These drones weren't built for speed or style. They were built to die well. Each one cost less than a luxury car, but their software, priceless. They used real-time Starlink data to predict terrain shifts. They used thermal sensors to map obstacles in the dark. They didn't just follow a path. They evolved it in real time, dancing through the fog like phantoms with a mission. But here's the twist most people miss. Only 10 of them were real killers. The other 10, decoys, distractions, digital ghosts designed to die loudly and draw fire. It was a plan born not in a general's mind, but in a coder's laptop. And every line of code led to one objective: blind the giant, distract the guns, clear the path. Silverwolf was a sword. These drones, they were the scalpel, and their hands never shook. But even the smartest machines in the world needed one thing to succeed: a blind spot. And Russia had one, hard-coded into the brain of its most powerful weapon. On paper, the S-400 is a masterpiece. A fortress of circuits and steel, capable of tracking 300 targets simultaneously across 250 miles of sky. It's fast, it's precise, it's terrifying. Unless you send it 301. At 5:32 a.m., that's exactly what happened. The Russian radar screen, moments ago a serene sea of green, erupted into chaos. Hundreds of phantom blips blinked into existence. Too many, too fast, and all of them fake. The decoy drones had arrived, but this wasn't just a distraction, it was an overload. You see, the S-400's command brain, its processing core, wasn't infinite. Buried in its code, in its very design, was a ceiling, 300 targets. That's all it could see, sort, and respond to at once. Ukraine sent 301. The system didn't crash. It did something worse. It tried to fight back. Missiles launched. Warnings blared. The sky lit up like the 4th of July, except every shot was aimed at a ghost. And while the giant roared blindly into the night, it did something even more dangerous. It screamed its position. You see, radar isn't passive, it's active. Every pulse it sends is a flare in the dark. And in this moment, the S-400 was shouting louder than it ever had. 50 miles away, Silverwolf heard it. Not as a beep, not as a chirp, but as a solid wall of sound on his threat receiver. That was the signal. He didn't hesitate. 2 AGM-88 HARM missiles dropped from his wings. They didn't need a target lock, they just needed the noise. The S-400 had become the loudest thing in the sky, and the HARMs? They were heat-seeking missiles for sound. What happened next wasn't a dogfight. It was a one-sided execution, because once the harms were airborne, the S-400 had just seconds to live. But even if the giant was blinded, the real mission hadn't even started. The decoys had done their job. The harms were flying. But deep inside Russian territory, the war wasn't over. It was just holding its breath, waiting to see if the giant would fall. For a full 90 seconds, Silverwolf was blind. The harms were gone, launched, fired into the night like twin lightning bolts. But in the cockpit, silence. No explosion, no confirmation, just the sound of engines. And the haunting question, did they hit? He couldn't turn back, he couldn't stop, he could only fly, fast, low, and cold, waiting for a sign. Then it happened. At exactly 5:33 a.m., a flash on the horizon. Not lightning, not flak, but a blinding, silent burst of white. The harms had found their mark. The giant was blind. For the first time in over a decade, the S-400 at Kirishi fell silent. Its radar, once the most feared electronic eye in the region, had gone dark. And that was the signal. "Engaging target!" Silverwolf barked, yanking the stick. The Su-24 screamed as it climbed, its engines protesting, its wings trembling under the strain. This wasn't a graceful ascent. It was a desperate lunge, because now he needed altitude. Those 4 550-pound bombs under his wings weren't just heavy, they were smart. But to glide 43 miles to their target, they needed energy, speed, height. And to gain that altitude, Silverwolf had to do the one thing no sane pilot ever does in enemy airspace. He had to become visible. He traded stealth for trajectory, shadow for reach, invisibility for death-defying exposure. And down below, in the chaos of a dying S-400, another threat was still alive. A Pantsir S-1 unit, Russia's short-range shield, hadn't gone blind. It wasn't plugged into the main grid. It had its own eyes. Its operator saw the rising heat signature, a lone bomber clawing for the sky, a glowing afterburner against the cold pre-dawn air. It was the clearest shot of the night, and he took it. Missiles locked, guns primed, target acquired. Back in the sky, Silverwolf's targeting screen lit up, not with bombs away, but with danger. He had 10 seconds, maybe less. Swarm, execute escape protocol, expend all, he commanded. His voice was steel, and with that, the mission changed. The remaining 8 killer drones broke off formation. They weren't heading for the refinery anymore. They were heading for the Pantsir. Like angry fireflies, they lit up the thermal sensors, faking massive heat signatures as they raced toward the guns. They weren't meant to survive. They were meant to be the last line of defense. The Pantsir operator faced an impossible choice: shoot the high-value bomber still miles away, or the 8 drones about to slam into his position in 10 seconds. He chose survival. The sky turned into a hurricane of tungsten. Cannons roared, drones exploded, but it was enough. Silverwolf's screen snapped to green. Bombs away. 4 warheads dropped, each thudding free with a brutal finality. And just like that, he dove, hard, back into the Earth's shadow, leaving fire and sacrifice behind him. The giant had blinked, the decoys had screamed, the shield had held. And now, the real show was just beginning. They weren't built to survive. They were built to decide. And when the choice came to finish the mission or save their commander, they didn't hesitate. They were never supposed to live. The 8 remaining Palianytsia drones weren't armored. They weren't fast. They weren't built to win a fight. But when the command came, expend all, they didn't question. They obeyed. They veered off course, breaking formation like sparks from a fire, each one making a beeline for the last threat standing, the Pantsir S-1. It was a suicide run, but it was also a calculation. Silverwolf was the sword, the bombs were the kill shot, and these drones, they were the shield. Their mission had changed, not to destroy but to delay, not to attack but to distract. And in doing so, they saved everything. From the ground, it looked like chaos. 8 drones lighting up the thermoscope like incoming missiles, each one broadcasting a massive heat signature, hotter than a jet engine, brighter than the rising sun. The Palianytsia's operator had no time to verify, no second chances. He saw the swarm, and he panicked. Cannons spun, missiles launched. One by one, the drones were torn from the sky, each sacrifice buying another 2 seconds, another 4, another breath. Silverwolf didn't see their final moments, but he felt it in the sudden calm of his screen, in the green light confirming his bombs had cleared, in the absence of missile lock-on warnings. They did their job, they didn't flinch, and now they were gone. 8 machines, no names, no medals, no goodbyes. But in that moment, they became something more than drones. They became a wall between life and death, a firewall of flying courage, coded in silence, executed in flame. Because sometimes in war, victory isn't just about who strikes first. It's about who's willing to die, so someone else doesn't have to. With the radar blinded, the guns distracted, and the drones gone, the sky was suddenly quiet. But from 43 miles out, 4 angels of death were silently gliding toward their target. There was no sound, no roaring engines, no screaming alarms. Just 4 gliding shadows slicing through the stratosphere, silent, steady, and deadly. The chaos was behind them now. The dogfights, the drones, the sacrifice. Now it was math and inevitability. Each AASM hammer bomb had been programmed with a singular purpose. Each carried a hardened steel nose cone. Each knew exactly what it was looking for, and at 600 miles per hour they found it. 10 miles out, their onboard optical sensors lit up. Below them, the Kirishi Refinery, a maze of pipes, towers, tanks, and at its center the furnace. To most, it looked like infrastructure. To the bomb's memory, it was a perfect match. At 5:34 a.m., the first hammer struck. It didn't explode on impact. It punched through, steel wall, insulation, concrete shell. Then deep inside the core of the furnace, its timer hit 0. Detonation. A 550-pound warhead unleashed a shockwave of over 3,500 psi. Steel turned to shrapnel, concrete vaporized. But this wasn't the real weapon. The fireball was. Because Ukrainian intelligence had found something in the blueprints. Something the Russians had overlooked. Old Soviet-era ventilation shafts. Aging, forgotten. Linking the primary furnace to secondary catalytic crackers. The fire didn't stay in one room. It traveled. It spread. Fuel, gas, air. A perfect recipe. What followed wasn't just an explosion. It was a chain reaction. The second bomb hit a different sector, then the third, then the fourth. Their blasts didn't just add, they multiplied. Steel twisted, valves burst, pressure surged. The entire complex convulsed from within. It was surgical, it was catastrophic, and it was over in 14 seconds. The heart of Kirishi didn't collapse. It erupted. Flames shot skyward. Secondary explosions began. Tanks rupturing, pipelines igniting, sirens howling too late. By 5:35 a.m., a black column of smoke was rising over northern Russia, so massive NATO satellites picked it up in real time. In a single strike, 40% of the refinery's capacity, 142,000 barrels per day, was gone. That's $200 million a month. That's 50,000 tank movements that will now never happen. That's an entire region's fuel supply, vaporized. And somewhere on the edge of the horizon, still hugging the Earth's curve, a lone bomber turned home. Alive, untouched, and unaware of the inferno left behind. But the numbers didn't lie. $900,000 of drones, bombs, and fuel had just taken out a $579 billion asset. And Russia's northern war machine? It was bleeding. This wasn't just a victory. It was a thesis, a warning, a glimpse into the future of war where silence, strategy, and sacrifice rewrite the battlefield. And the price tag. It didn't look like victory. There were no parades, no generals saluting, no waving flags, just one jet. Scarred, tired, low on fuel, skimming the treetops as it vanished back into the morning haze. But make no mistake, this was a masterpiece. 1 plane, 20 drones, 4 bombs, all coordinated to exploit one truth. You don't need to beat your enemy everywhere. You just need to find where he's blind. In this case, it was a curve in the earth and a line of code. For under $1 million, Ukraine had delivered a $579 billion strike. That's a 64,000% return on investment. Not even Wall Street could pull that off. But this wasn't about money. It was about message. A message to Russia. Your fortress isn't impenetrable. A message to the world. Old weapons can still win if the thinking behind them is new. And a message to every military strategist watching from afar. Precision isn't just about hitting the target. It's about knowing where to aim, and when, and how. Silverwolf never saw the full damage. He didn't need to. He trusted the math, the machines, the mission. And as the horizon burned behind him, he knew one thing. This war had just changed. Not with a nuclear blast, not with a shock and awe campaign, but with whispers in the grass, with ghosts in the radar shadow, with algorithms and courage and the oldest trick in the book, knowing your enemy better than he knows himself. So now the question isn't whether Ukraine can reach deep into Russian territory. They just did. The real question is, where do they go next? What do you think Ukraine should target next? Another refinery, a communications hub, something we haven't seen coming. Let me know your war plan in the comments. And if you found this breakdown as fascinating and as terrifying as I did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because this is just the beginning.